and welcome everyone to Numerology Quick Takes. This week, we're going to take a look at the week of March 17th, where we'll be working with the vibration of the 12-3. So we're going to break this down, of course. We're going to talk about the vibration of the 3 because that is really at the heart of this energy. But sort of to understand the dynamic of how we'll be working with that 3 energy this week, we have to understand the 12. So really, the 12 energy, we have the vibrations of the 1 and the 2. The 1 is self. It's about our identity. It's how we express ourselves. It's how we see ourselves in the world, how we put our best foot forward, so to speak. It's about expressing ourselves. You know, what is it that we want? How do we go after what it is that we want? How do we assert ourselves? How do we speak up for ourselves? How do we take up more space and present ourselves within our connections, within our interactions with others? So a lot this week about reflecting upon ourselves. And again, how we show up to certain situations, how we express ourselves in the world, where it is that we hold ourselves back from doing that, where it is in relationships, especially because we have the vibration of the 2. So relationships are at the forefront this week. How we show up to connections and how we express ourselves within those connections. Now, because the vibration of the 2 is so strong within this week, the energies this week, we will be looking at our relationships, our connections, how we again connect to another person. So it's not just solely about ourselves this week. It's about that dynamic, the dynamic of how we show up to our relationships. And in that sort of bigger picture, we're looking at, again, how we express ourselves in connections, how we assert ourselves within connections, how much space do we take up within those connections? In other words, are we more of a giver or are we more of a taker? Or is there reciprocity and an equal exchange within those connections? If there is, then this will be probably a pretty peaceful, enjoyable week for you within those connections where there is that reciprocity. And so more than likely, the relationships that will come to the surface this week for review, because the 12 energy is also about pausing, slowing down, reflection, review, probably those connections that will surface this week to be looked at are the ones where either someone is taking too much or giving too much, where there isn't that reciprocity, where it is that, again, we're not showing up in an authentic way, where there isn't sort of greater collaboration or communication within those connections. And because of that 1 and that 2 energy, again, it's us looking at how we are entering into that exchange, how we are participating, because that's the only thing that we have control over, is how we show up to those connections, how we participate, and what we accept. So it could come into focus this week where we have been accepting someone taking advantage of us, or someone, abusing us in some way, or someone taking our power away in some way. Of course, in life, we can be the victim of many things and other people. But, not to sound trite or cliche here, but it's how we handle those situations. Like, what do we do with them? How do we pick ourselves up and move forward? Or how do we find ways to remove ourselves from those relationships that might be toxic or might not be healthy? Because that's, again, all that we really have control over. And so we may be asked this week to see how is it that we are participating within those connections? What are we accepting? Another side of this is to be very present with the other person who may have had a really bad experience with us, or who views the connection not as healthy for them, with us, right? And so there is an element here where we are meant to, again, because at the core of this, the heart of this week is the 3 energy. We're meant to be having the conversations. And we talk a lot about this on this channel, actually, when we're talking about 3 energy, is the need for greater conversation, honest conversation, right? Nobody is a mind reader. Nobody knows what you're thinking. We might think they do, right? But a lot of times what we think they know is really about the stories that we create within our own mind. And it really has not a lot to do with the actual scenario. And it's only through the conversation that we gain the greater understanding of what is actually at play, like what the other person is actually thinking. And it gives the other person an opportunity to fully understand what we're thinking and what we're moving through and what we want to, how we want to participate and what that looks like. And that can't happen without the conversation. Anything else is simply an assumption and moving off the stories within our own mind, or moving off the stories from what maybe happened in the past, right? But the past is no longer happening. Now we're in the present. And usually, especially when we move through 12-3 cycles, we can see people come back into our experience from the past. And something this energy really asks us to do is, when that happens, to meet that person where they are at now, not where they were at, 10 years ago. Because likely a lot has changed for ourselves as also for that other person. And so if someone does resurface into your life this week, have the conversation. You might have the conversation and find out, okay, things haven't really changed for this dynamic. It's not working. And you may decide that, it's time to part ways again. And that's fine, right? It's fine. It depends on how we view the situation, what the situation truly is, and how it affects our lives. And if it's not working, then it's okay to release it, to remove yourself from that situation. But it's also possible that in having that conversation and meeting that person where they're at now, things have changed for both, and you're actually able to pick up and start a new storyline. That storyline will likely look very different from the past. That connection may look very different from the past, but it opens the doors for at least the conversation. And it's only through that conversation that we can have that greater understanding of how we want to move forward and how the other person wants to move forward. Even if the conversation is simply to clear the air and so that both people can move forward in a healthier way, then this energy has served its purpose. But part of that is also, in having those conversations, is having a greater understanding of our own actions, like to accept the feedback from the other person about their experience with us. And what that does is it allows us to see ourselves through another perspective. Because a lot of times we only have our own blinders on, right? We can only see ourselves through our own perspective and through our own experiences. And though that is truth for us, it's not exactly truth for someone and their experience with us. And so having the conversation without getting defensive, without having a debate, but actually having the conversation allows both people or all involved to truly understand how their actions, how they, participated, affected the other person. Doesn't mean that you have to change who you are. Doesn't mean that you have to even change your actions. But it's an opportunity through that feedback to take responsibility and take accountability for those actions. Because it's not that your intention was to do harm or to treat someone poorly or for them to have a bad experience. But if their experience with us was poor, right, or our actions treated them poorly in some way, it's worth just having the conversation and to hear it. Because again, if we start to notice a pattern, we can see, maybe I do treat people this way, or maybe I do act out this way, or maybe I do tend to be the know-it-all and take control of the situation or whatever, and those actions have an effect. Our actions always have an effect, a ripple effect into the greater collective. And sometimes it helps to have a better understanding of how our actions affect others. Again, it's up to us what we choose to do with that feedback. But if we get defensive and we say, well, that's not what I intended, or that's not the way I remember it, or et cetera, we're basically invalidating the other person's experience, but with a need to be right. And so this energy, which again is like review, right? Deeper contemplation, revisit, etc., and conversation, have the conversation, it allows us to simply see ourselves through someone else's eyes. It's great when people have wonderful experiences with us, right? And those are valid too. But there's definitely going to be times where people have not so great experiences with us. And it doesn't really necessarily matter what our intention was. We just have to listen and hear what they have to say. And again, if we still feel like we are in the right or whatever it may be, we don't have to change who we are. We don't have to change course. We don't have to change our actions. But it just means that connection may not be the best connection for all involved. And so ultimately it comes down to, is this relationship a relationship that I want to have in my life? Is this a relationship that I want it to be healthy? If it is, then it's really worth hearing the feedback and making modifications where necessary, taking responsibility and accountability where necessary, and doing the work. If it's a relationship that we don't feel is healthy, we feel it's toxic, or it's not serving all involved, then still listen to the feedback, because it's always good to know what another person's true experience is with us. Even though that experience is often coming through their own filter, it still helps us to understand how we tend to move through the world, no matter what our intention is of moving through the world. But if through those conversations we see that, you know what, this is who I am, this is how I move through the world, it might not just be for everybody, and that's okay too. But we just have to also understand that that relationship may also not be a part of our world. And it's not bad or good. It's just, not all relationships are meant to last forever. Sometimes they just come in and teach us something about ourselves, and we move forward. And that's okay too. It doesn't have to end with vindictiveness or anger or frustration or all of the things, or blame or any of that. It's just an understanding that how we move through the world might not be for everybody. And that's okay. Unless it's a relationship we really want in our lives. Then it's worth having those conversations, listening to the feedback, and deciding, where we can compromise. Or again, understanding where it is that we have some responsibility as well. Because in every relationship, we have some level of responsibility in how we show up to those connections. I mean, we really have full responsibility in how we show up to those connections. We don't have any responsibility for how the other person takes that experience, right? But it is our responsibility to listen to the feedback and then decide how we want to move forward from there. So beautiful energy this week for pause and review when it comes to our relationships. Also, our relationship with ourselves. How do we treat ourselves? How do we talk to ourselves? All of these things could be coming up for review at this time, because how we treat others and how we allow others to treat us is truly a reflection of how we feel about ourselves. So if we are treating others poorly, which again, we might not see that we're treating others poorly, but if we're treating others poorly, it's because we see ourselves poorly. If we are allowing others to treat us poorly, it's because we see ourselves poorly. And so this energy this week gives us an opportunity through our relationships, typically, to see how we truly feel about ourselves in how we, again, treat others and how we accept treatment from others. So that could absolutely be coming up at this time. The other thing I would say is pay attention to your messaging, your words, what you're putting out into the world. Again, we're talking about this 3 energy, and so much of this is about the written spoken word and our messaging, the way that we communicate. And so, really pay attention. And usually this is a really good indicator for where we are at when it comes to emotional maturity. Really pay attention to how you treat others online, where there isn't that immediate, we don't have to face the immediate consequences of that, where we become the keyboard warrior, right? It goes back to that whole idea of, how would you talk to someone if you were face to face with them? Would you block them? Would you call them the names that you would call them if they weren't in front of you? How would you treat that person? Truly, we so lose sight of that when we're behind a keyboard and a screen, and we don't have to face the consequences of our actions with that other person. So this is a really good time to kind of think about that. How do we express ourselves, when we don't have to face the immediate consequences of that expression? And do we feel good about it? There's definitely that quick hit of, it feels really good when you're in the moment and you're unleashing, your fury onto the world or onto somebody online or whatever. But that usually goes away pretty quickly. And then, there's usually a sense of, would I say that to that person if I was face to face with them? Probably not. And numerology, we know as numerologists that words have power. There is a vibration between every letter. And when you put those letters together, boy, that's some power. That's a heavy vibration, a heavy energy to throw at someone. Words can cut people down. Words can cut people's wings. Words can shatter someone for a really long time. And so whether they show it or not. And if you think back to your childhood, because, we've all experienced some kind of bullying or, judgment or whatever, harshness through words at some point in life, that's usually what we remember. It's not the broken bones. I mean, sometimes it is, but it's not the broken bones that we remember like it was yesterday. It's the words. It's the words. So much power behind words. So pay attention. Pay attention to that charged energy that you are putting out into the world. Be really mindful about it because it does carry weight. It really does. Pay attention to how you're communicating with another person. Are you truly showing up for a conversation or are you showing up for a debate? Because a debate, there's a winner and a loser. With conversation, there's no winner or loser. It's just about a deeper understanding of all involved so that common ground can be found. And do you feel good about your messaging? Do you feel good about, even when you don't, again, when you're sort of behind the screen, the best way to think about it is, would I say this to this person if I were face to face with them? If you would, great, continue on. If you would not, then, then maybe modify it in some way. And, still speak your truth. It's not about, not expressing yourself, because remember, we've got that one energy. Of course, we want to express ourselves authentically. But there's also a way to do that where we're not cutting down another person. We're not tearing down another person. So a lot coming in this this week, not only about relationships, but how we conduct ourselves within those relationships. And this week, some could see, because we're right now, we're in sort of this weird, funky energy between eclipses. Like we just had the full moon lunar eclipse. And then on the 29th, we're having the partial solar eclipse. And so, there's some funky energy going on right now. So, and relationships are sort of like in the forefront this week. Also, again, communication. But really at the core of it is how we show up to those connections, how we present ourselves, how we engage. And, for some, this could be a week where those relationships break. Like this could be a breaking point for a lot of people within their relationships. And I'm not talking about just romantic relationships. I'm talking about this might be the week that you quit your job because you just cannot do it anymore with your toxic boss or whatever. You know what I mean? That could be the case for some this week. Those toxic relationships where either the conversation can't happen or it does happen and there's just no middle ground, there could be that breaking point this week. And that's okay. Remember, not only do we have responsibility for how we show up to relationships, we also have responsibility for how we disengage, like how we close out those relationships, how we move away from those relationships, how we release them or remove ourselves from those relationships. We can either do it with, again, being vindictive and have a vendetta and do it with anger and resentment and all the venom, which really isn't serving anyone, including ourselves. Or we can find a way to release it in a healthy way. Move through the emotions, move through the grief if necessary. And sometimes that grief for losing connections can take years. So give yourself the time that you need to be able to grieve that release. For some, this could be a week where, again, someone resurfaces and it's a beautiful connection, a new, beautiful, fresh starting point. If both are able to connect and have those deeper conversations and truly meet each other where they're at in this moment and not bring forth and continuously bring forth the baggage from the past and beat the other person over the head with it. So truly, truly beautiful energy here. Again, I would say just be careful about just be mindful of your messaging. Be mindful of the energy that you're putting out into the world every time you type or write or speak. I mean, it's a lot of responsibility, but honestly, words are a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of energy there. There's a lot of potency. And words can either build people up and uplift people, inspire people, build bridges, or they can tear a lot down, a heck of a lot down. They can really do a lot of damage. So, and once they're out there, the old adage is true, once you speak it, you can't take it back. I mean, you just can't. No word can erase a word spoken. So, big energy this week. Big energy as we move towards this solar eclipse in Aries, which is going to be, I think, pretty intense. Yeah. I would say be careful about reactivity, especially in your relationships. Be really gentle with your connections. Even if they're not the healthiest connection. Doesn't mean, lay down and become a doormat. Not at all. Because remember, we got that one energy that says, be assertive, speak up for yourself, don't take shit, right? If you are being taken advantage of, this is a great week to, just hit the gas or hit the brake on that and no more. And only you can decide when that happens. So a lot of really empowering energy this week. Really beautiful energy for reconnection, really beautiful energy for connection at this time. Whatever it is, whatever shows up. And for those of you who meet new people this week, I would say in all situations, take it slow. Really get to know the person sitting before you. even if it's someone who's coming back from your past, really take the time to get to know this person, who they are now in this moment, because that's going to help you decide how you want to move forward and what's in the highest good for all involved. So I hope it's a great week. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.